Jake Morrison stood at the viewing port of the transport ship and watched the massive space station grow larger. The Galactic Defense Academy looked like a small moon floating in the darkness. Lights blinked across its surface and ships moved in and out of the docking bays like insects around a hive. His heart pounded in his chest. This was really happening. He was actually here. The transport docked with a soft thud and the doors hissed open. Jake grabbed his single bag and followed the other new cadets into the station. He immediately felt small. The corridor was built for beings much larger than humans, and the ceiling stretched high above his head. Around him, aliens of every shape and size moved through the halls. Some walked on 2 legs like him, others on 4 or 6. Some had scales, others had fur, and some seemed to be made of crystal or metal. A massive creature passed by Jake, nearly knocking him over without even noticing. It stood at least 8 feet tall, covered in thick gray skin that looked like armor. Its arms were as thick as tree trunks. Jake pressed himself against the wall and let it pass. His hands were shaking. What was he doing here? These beings were built for war. He was just a regular guy from Earth. The orientation hall was enormous. Hundreds of cadets gathered in groups talking in languages Jake did not understand. His translator implant worked overtime, feeding him rough translations of the conversations around him. Most of it was boasting and comparisons of physical abilities. A group of 4-armed aliens were arm wrestling, using all their limbs at once. Another group with scales and sharp teeth were showing off their claws. Jake found a quiet corner and tried to make himself invisible. He pulled out his datapad and reviewed the Academy information again. The Galactic Defense Academy trained warriors and peacekeepers from every member world of the Coalition. Physical combat, strategy, survival skills, and leadership were the main focus. Only the best were accepted. Humanity had been given 10 slots in this year's class as part of their new membership in the Coalition. A shadow fell over Jake. He looked up and up and up. The creature standing before him was massive, easily 7 feet tall with dark green scales covering its body. Its eyes were yellow with vertical slits for pupils like a snake or a lizard. When it opened its mouth, Jake saw rows of sharp teeth. "You are human," the creature said. Its voice was deep and rough, like gravel grinding together. Jake stood up slowly. Even standing, the top of his head barely reached the creature's chest. "Yes, my name is Jake Morrison." The creature studied him for a long moment. "I am Drex, I am Corvin. We are roommates." It was not a question. It was a statement of fact. "Oh, okay, nice to meet you," Jake said, extending his hand. He remembered too late that not all species shook hands. Drex looked at Jake's hand, then carefully took it in his own. His hand was huge, with thick claws on each finger. He could have crushed Jake's hand easily, but his grip was surprisingly gentle. "You are very small," Drex observed. "Yeah, I get that a lot here," Jake said with a weak smile. They walked together to their assigned quarters. The room was basic but functional. 2 beds, 2 desks, 2 storage lockers. Everything was sized for the larger species, which meant Jake would need to climb onto his bed. Drex's bed looked normal for him, but Jake's looked like a platform. "Why are humans here?" Drex asked suddenly. "No offense is meant, but your species is very new. Very weak. I have read your file. No natural armor, no claws or fangs, no venom, no enhanced strength. What can humans do?" Jake had been asking himself the same question. "I guess we're about to find out," he said. The next morning, the real training began. Commander Vex, a tall insectoid creature with multiple eyes and sharp mandibles, addressed the new class. His voice was cold and precise. "You are here to become warriors. You are here to learn to fight, to survive, to protect the Coalition. Many species, many abilities, but here you are all the same. You are all cadets. You will be tested. Many of you will fail. Those who succeed will become the finest fighters in the galaxy." The first test was a simple run, 5 miles through the station's training level. Jake lined up with the others. When the signal sounded, he started running. Immediately, dozens of cadets rushed past him. Beings with 4 legs moved like the wind. Others with powerful muscles pulled ahead easily. Jake settled into a steady pace. He could not match their speed, but he could keep going. By the 2nd mile, some of the faster cadets were slowing down. By the 3rd mile, several had stopped completely, gasping for air. Jake kept his breathing steady and maintained his pace. He was not fast, but he did not stop. By the finish line, he was somewhere in the middle of the pack. Not great, but not last. The strength tests were harder. Jake could barely lift the weights that other cadets moved easily. During combat drills, he was paired against larger opponents and spent most of his time on the ground. The instructors watched him with expressions he could not read. Were they disappointed? Curious? He could not tell. In the cafeteria that evening, Jake sat alone. The food was strange, designed to be nutritious for multiple species. It did not taste bad, but it did not taste like anything from Earth either. He ate slowly, watching the other cadets. They laughed and talked in their groups. He was an outsider here. A group of cadets at a nearby table were speaking loud enough for everyone to hear. "Did you see the human in training today? Pathetic, why are they even here?" One of them laughed, a harsh barking sound. "They have no armor, no weapons, nothing. They are prey animals, not warriors." Jake kept eating, pretending he did not hear. His face felt hot, but he refused to look at them. Getting angry would not help. Fighting would be stupid. He just needed to get through this. That night, lying in his too large bed, Jake stared at the ceiling. His body ached from training. He had bruises on his arms and legs from being thrown around during combat practice. Maybe everyone was right. Maybe humans did not belong here. "Every species has something," Drek said quietly from his bed across the room. "Something that makes them dangerous. Something that lets them survive. You just need to find what humans have." Jake did not respond, but he thought about Drex's words long into the night. What did humans have? What made them dangerous? He fell asleep without an answer. The days turned into weeks, and training became Jake's entire world. Every morning started before dawn with physical conditioning. Every evening ended with exhausted cadets returning to their quarters. Jake pushed himself harder than he ever had in his life, but the gap between him and the other cadets seemed impossible to close. In endurance training, Jake discovered something interesting. While he could not sprint as fast as many species, he could keep going long after they stopped. The academy ran a 20-mile course through the station's lower levels. It was brutal. Many of the fastest cadets burned out after the first few miles. But Jake kept his steady pace, and when he crossed the finish line, he was in the top third of the class. Some of the instructors made notes on their data pads. Combat training was a different story. The academy taught multiple fighting styles from across the galaxy. Jake learned quickly that most alien combat was about using natural advantages. The four-armed Centauri used all their limbs to grab and strike. The armored Thaldrine used their thick skin to absorb hits while they overpowered opponents. The crystalline Voxen were fragile but incredibly fast. Jake had no natural advantages. He was not especially strong or fast. His skin was soft and easily damaged. Every sparring session left him with new bruises. The instructors paired him with different species, trying to find where he fit. He learned to lose in 100 different ways, but Jake noticed things. He watched how different species moved. He saw patterns in their attacks. The Thaldrine always charged straight ahead. The Centauri tried to grab first before striking. The Voxen circled and looked for openings. His mind stored these observations, filing them away. 3 weeks into training, a new cadet joined their class. His name was Krath, and he was Vorgan. The moment he walked into the training hall, everyone stopped and stared. Krath stood over 8 feet tall, his body covered in dense muscle. Bone protrusions jutted from his forearms and knuckles like natural weapons. His face was harsh and angular, with eyes that seemed to look through people rather than at them. Vorgans were famous throughout the galaxy as warriors. Their entire culture was built around combat. They considered fighting to be the highest form of expression. A Vorgan warrior was worth 10 soldiers of most other species. They were fast, strong, and seemingly impossible to stop in a fight. Krath came from a distinguished military family. His father was a general in the Vorgan assault fleets. His 3 older brothers were all decorated combat veterans. For Krath, the academy was just a formality, a box to check before he joined the fleet and earned glory in battle. During the first training session, Krath destroyed every opponent he faced. He moved with brutal efficiency, using his size and strength to overwhelm other cadets in seconds. Even the instructors seemed impressed. Commander Vex announced that Krath would be an excellent example for the other cadets to learn from. Jake tried to stay off Krath's radar, but that was impossible. During a formation exercise, Krath was positioned near Jake. The Vorgan looked down at the human and made a sound of disgust. "A human. I heard they let your kind in. Soft skins. Weak. You do not belong here." Jake said nothing. He kept his eyes forward and his expression neutral. Engaging would only make things worse, but Krath was not finished. The Academy weakens itself by accepting prey species. You should be serving food, not training as warriors. Drex, standing nearby, growled low in his throat. The human passed the same tests as everyone else. Krath laughed, a harsh sound. Then the tests are too easy. The situation came to a head during a combat exercise. The class was divided into pairs for sparring. Jake was paired with a Centauri cadet named Ven, one of the four-armed species. They had sparred before, and while Ven usually won, Jake had learned to last longer in each session. They began their match, circling each other. Ven moved in with his multiple arms, trying to grab Jake. Jake slipped to the side, avoided two of the arms, but got caught by the third. Ven pulled Jake off balance and was about to score a clean takedown when something hit Jake from behind. The impact sent Jake sprawling across the mat. Pain exploded in his shoulder and back. He rolled and looked up to see Krath standing there, having shoved him aside. The Vorgan was now facing Ven instead. "Let me show you how it is done," Krath said. He moved forward and defeated Ven in less than 5 seconds, using pure strength to overpower all four arms. Jake got to his feet slowly, his shoulder throbbing. The instructors had seen what happened. Lieutenant Cora, one of the human instructors, approached. "Cadet Krath, interference in another cadet's match is prohibited." Krath turned to her. "I was helping. The human was about to be hurt. I prevented injury." His tone made it clear he did not believe his own words. Lieutenant Cora's eyes narrowed. "Return to your position." Over the next few days, Krath continued to make Jake's life difficult. He would bump into Jake in the corridors, nearly knocking him over. He made comments just loud enough for others to hear about weak species and how the Academy's standards were falling. Some cadets laughed at his remarks. Others stayed silent but did not object. Then came the incident in the weapons training hall. Cadets were practicing with various weapons from their home worlds. Jake was working with a simple training staff, one of the few weapons that felt natural to him. Krath was across the room with a Vorgan war club, a massive weapon that he swung with terrifying speed. During a rotation, Krath moved to the same practice area as Jake. As they passed each other, Krath's weapon suddenly swung in a wide arc. Jake saw it coming and tried to dodge, but the club struck his left arm. The impact was like being hit by a hammer. Jake went down, his arm numb and useless. The instructors rushed over. Krath stood there with an expression of false concern. "An accident. I did not see him there. He is so small." Jake's arm was not broken, but it was badly bruised. The medical staff treated him and cleared him to return to training in a few days. As Jake left the medical bay, he found Krath waiting outside. "You are in my way, human," Krath said quietly. "Your presence here insults real warriors. I have decided to remove that insult." Jake met his eyes. "What do you want?" "A formal challenge. Combat duel in the arena? You and me, sanctioned by Academy rules." Krath smiled, showing his teeth. "Unless you are too afraid?" Jake knew what this meant. Academy rules allowed cadets to challenge each other to settle disputes through controlled combat. It was meant to teach honor and resolve conflicts. But it was also dangerous. Injuries were common, and refusing a challenge was considered cowardice, which could lead to expulsion. 3 days from now, Krath continued, the arena. Everyone will watch. Everyone will see what happens when prey tries to be a predator. Jake's mind raced. He could refuse and be labeled a coward, likely ending his time at the Academy. Or he could accept and face a warrior who outweighed him by over 100 pounds, who had trained in combat since childhood, and who could probably kill him in seconds if the referees were not watching carefully. "I accept," Jake heard himself say. Krath's smile widened. "Good, 3 days. Do not run away before then." He turned and walked away. Jake stood alone in the corridor, his heart pounding. What had he just done? 3 days to prepare to fight a Vorgan warrior. 3 days to figure out how to survive. Drex found him a few minutes later. The Corvin put a hand on Jake's good shoulder. "This is bad. Krath is very dangerous." "I know," Jake said quietly. "We will help you prepare," Drex said. "But you must know the truth. No human has ever defeated a Vorgan in single combat. Not in recorded history." Jake nodded slowly. "Then I guess it is time to make history." Jake did not sleep much that first night. His mind would not stop working. He lay in his bed and thought about the fight. If he tried to match Krath's strength, he would lose in seconds. If he tried to outrun him in the arena, he would eventually get caught. There had to be another way. The next morning, Jake went to the Academy library instead of breakfast. The library was a massive database containing information about every species in the Coalition. Jake started with the Vorgons. He read everything: their history, their culture, their biology. He watched videos of Vorgon combat competitions. He studied how they moved, how they attacked, how they defended. Vorgons were powerful but not complicated fighters. They used overwhelming force and aggression. Their combat style was direct and brutal. They charged forward, used their bone weapons to strike, and overpowered opponents through sheer strength. They were taught that showing any weakness was worse than death. Retreating or yielding brought shame to a warrior and their entire family. Jake made notes on his datapad. Vorgons relied on intimidation. They expected opponents to be afraid, to make mistakes because of fear. Their attacks were powerful but followed predictable patterns. They committed fully to each strike because they were confident in their ability to overpower any defense. Next, Jake studied Vorgon anatomy. Their bone structure was denser than human bone, making them harder to injure. Their muscle tissue was more efficient, giving them greater strength. But they had pressure points, just like every species. Jake found medical diagrams showing Vorgon nerve clusters. There was one point on the jaw, similar to where humans had the vagus nerve that connected to the brain and nervous system. For hours, Jake read and watched and learned. He missed meals. He missed sleep. Drex brought him food and forced him to eat, but Jake barely tasted it. His focus was complete. On the second day, Jake went to the training halls, but he did not train the way others expected. He did not lift weights or practice power strikes. Instead, he worked on footwork. He practiced moving efficiently, wasting no energy. He worked on distance management, learning exactly how far he could move in one step, how quickly he could change direction. Other cadets watched him with confusion. Some laughed. "The human practices dancing," one said. "Perhaps he will dance away from Krath." The laughter echoed through the hall. Jake ignored them. He knew what he was doing looked strange, but he was not training to fight the way they fought. He was training to fight the way a human fought. Lieutenant Cora found him in the training hall late that evening. She was the only other human instructor at the academy, a former Special Forces operator who had earned her position through skill and determination. She watched Jake practice for several minutes before speaking. "You are not training to beat him," she observed. "You are training to survive him." Jake stopped and turned to her. "I cannot beat him in a straight fight. He is too strong, too fast. So you will not fight straight," Cora said. She stepped onto the mat. "You know what makes humans dangerous in combat? It is not strength. It is not natural weapons. It is this," she tapped her head. "We think, we adapt. We find solutions." She moved closer to Jake. "Every other species fights on instinct. They use what nature gave them. But humans? We had to create every advantage we have. We made weapons. We developed fighting techniques. We learned to use our minds as much as our bodies." Cora showed Jake proper stance, proper weight distribution. She corrected his footwork, making it more efficient. She taught him about kinetic linking, how to transfer power from the ground through his entire body into a single point of impact. "Humans are persistence hunters," she explained. "We are not the fastest or strongest, but we can keep going. We can outlast, and we can think through violence in ways other species cannot." She showed him one specific technique, a strike designed not for power but for precision. The target was specific. The angle was exact. The timing was critical. "If you get the chance," she said, "if he gives you the opening, this is what you do. One strike. Perfectly placed. That is all you need." Jake practiced the technique over and over until his arm ached. The motion needed to be automatic, something his body could do without thinking, because in the arena there would be no time to think. On the third morning, Jake did something that surprised everyone. He rested, he ate a proper breakfast. He sat in the common area and read a book from Earth, something his mother had sent him. He looked calm, almost relaxed. Drex found him there. "The fight is in 6 hours. Should you not be training?" "I have done all the training I can do," Jake said. "Now I need to be rested." Other cadets stopped by throughout the day. Some offered advice. Some wished him luck. A few told him it was not too late to forfeit the match. Jake thanked them all but did not change his plans. Ven, the Centauri cadet, approached him. "I will not lie to you, Jake. Krath is very dangerous. But I have watched you these past weeks. You are tougher than you look. More determined. Whatever happens, you have already proven you belong here. Those words meant more to Jake than Ven probably knew. Belonging. That was what this was really about. Not just the fight with Krath, but proving that humans deserved to be at the academy. 2 hours before the fight, Jake went to the medical bay for a final check. The doctors scanned him and declared him fit for combat. They also reviewed the safety protocols. Referees would stop the fight if either fighter was in serious danger. Lethal force was strictly prohibited, but injuries were expected and accepted. Jake returned to his quarters and put on his training uniform. Simple gray clothing designed for movement. No armor, no padding. Just the clothes and his own body. He looked at himself in the mirror. He looked small, young, fragile, but his eyes were calm and focused. Drex entered the room. It is time. The arena is full. Everyone wants to watch. Jake nodded and followed Drex out. As they walked through the corridors, Jake noticed how quiet everything was. Most cadets were already at the arena. The few who passed Jake in the halls looked at him with expressions he could not quite read. Pity? Respect? Fear? They reached the entrance to the arena. Jake could hear the crowd inside, hundreds of voices talking and shouting. The sound was like an ocean rising and falling. Through the entrance, he could see the arena floor. It was a large circular space with a smooth surface surrounded by rising tiers of seats. Lieutenant Cora was waiting at the entrance. She looked at Jake for a long moment, then nodded. Remember everything. Be smart. Be human. Jake stepped through the entrance and into the noise. The crowd's voices washed over him like a wave. He walked to the center of the arena, his footsteps echoing despite the noise around him. The crowd was massive. Every seat was filled. Cadets from dozens of species had come to watch. Some were cheering. Some were silent. The Vorgan cadets in one section were chanting Krath's name. Across the arena, Krath entered. He looked even larger in the arena than he had in training. His muscles seemed carved from stone. The bone protrusions on his arms caught the light like weapons. He raised his arms to the crowd, and the Vorgan section roared their approval. Commander Vex stood at the edge of the arena along with several other instructors who would serve as referees. His voice amplified through the arena speakers. Cadet Krath of Vorga, Cadet Jake Morrison of Earth, you have chosen to settle your dispute through sanctioned combat. The rules are simple. Fight until one yields is incapacitated, or the referees stop the match. Lethal force is prohibited. Do you understand? Yes, Krath said loudly, his voice full of confidence. I understand, Jake said, his voice quiet but clear. Take your positions, Commander Vex ordered. Jake moved to one side of the arena. Krath moved to the other. They faced each other across 20 feet of open space. Jake took his stance, feet shoulder-width apart, knees slightly bent, hands up and ready. Krath stood tall and confident, his arms loose at his sides, utterly relaxed. The arena fell silent. Hundreds of beings held their breath. Even the Vorgan section stopped chanting. This was it, the moment everything had built toward. Commander Vex raised his hand. Begin. Krath charged the instant Commander Vex gave the signal. He moved with shocking speed for someone his size, covering half the distance between them in 2 powerful strides. His right arm came up, bone-ridged fist aimed at Jake's head with enough force to end the fight immediately. Jake moved, not backward but to the side. The punch passed through empty air where Jake's head had been a fraction of a second before. Krath's momentum carried him forward, and Jake was already repositioning, keeping distance between them. The crowd made a noise, part surprise and part disappointment. They had expected the human to stand his ground, to try to fight like a warrior. Instead, he moved away. Krath spun quickly, his expression showing annoyance. Stand and fight, human. Stop running. Jake said nothing. He maintained his stance, his eyes locked on Krath's center mass. He was not watching the Vorgan's hands or feet. He was watching his core, the part of the body that moved first before any attack. Krath came again, this time with a combination. A straight punch followed immediately by a hooking strike from his other arm. Both attacks were powerful enough to crack bones. Jake slipped the first punch, ducked under the second, and moved out of range again. His movements were efficient, no wasted motion. He was not running. He was creating distance. The crowd's noise grew louder. Some were shouting encouragement. Others were yelling for Jake to stop moving and fight properly. The Vorgan section was getting angry. In their culture, this kind of movement was dishonorable. A warrior should face his opponent directly, not dance around the arena. Krath's annoyance turned to anger. "Coward, face me!" For 30 seconds, the pattern continued. Krath attacked with power and aggression. Jake moved, slipped, and maintained distance. He was not trying to hurt Krath, he was studying him. Every attack taught Jake something. How far Krath could reach. How fast he could change direction. How he telegraphed his strikes. And Krath was getting frustrated. His attacks became bigger, more committed. He was putting more power into each strike, which meant more energy burned. His breathing was getting heavier. Sweat began to show on his skin. Jake noticed all of this. His own breathing was controlled and steady. His heart rate was elevated but manageable. He had trained for endurance. He could do this all day if needed. At the 45-second mark, Krath tried something different. Instead of single strikes, he came forward in a sustained assault. Multiple punches, one after another, trying to overwhelm Jake through volume. It was a smart tactic. Harder to avoid 10 strikes than one. Jake gave ground, moving backward while slipping and blocking what he could. A few glancing blows got through, hitting his shoulders and arms. They hurt, but nothing was broken. He let Krath push him toward the edge of the arena, then suddenly changed direction and circled away, returning to the center of the space. The crowd was getting confused. This was not how fights usually went in the arena. Most matches were decided in seconds through direct confrontation. This fight was already lasting over a minute, and the human had barely been hit. Krath stopped in the center of the arena, breathing hard. His face showed pure rage. "You disgrace combat with your cowardice. You are not a warrior. You are prey that knows it is about to die." Jake still said not speak, but his eyes never left Krath. He was waiting, watching, looking for the moment. Krath charged again, but this time there was desperation in his movement. He was angry, frustrated, and tired. His technique was suffering. Jake saw the opening he had been waiting for. Krath wound up for a massive overhead strike, putting all his strength and weight into one devastating blow. It was the kind of attack that would end the fight if it connected. The kind of attack that required full commitment. Jake moved forward. Not away, but into the attack. It was the last thing Krath expected. For a fraction of a second, the Vorgan's eyes widened in surprise. His strike was already in motion, committed, unable to change direction. Jake stepped to the side at the last possible moment. Krath's fist came down like a hammer, missing Jake by inches and hitting nothing but air. The force of his own strike pulled Krath forward and slightly off balance. His chin was exposed. His jaw was at the perfect height. Everything slowed down in Jake's perception. He had practiced this moment 1,000 times over the past 3 days. His body moved automatically, muscle memory taking over. His rear foot planted firmly on the ground. His hips rotated, transferring power from his legs through his torso. His shoulder drove forward. His arm extended in a tight, precise arc. His fist connected with the exact spot he had aimed for, the nerve cluster on Krath's jaw, just below and slightly behind the corner of his mouth. The impact was clean and direct. Jake felt the shock travel up his arm. It was not a wild punch. It was not a lucky hit. It was exactly what Lieutenant Cora had taught him. Precision, timing, the right amount of force in the right location. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Krath's head snapped to the side from the impact. His eyes, which had been full of rage a second before, suddenly went vacant. His legs, which had been driving forward with such power, lost all coordination. He took one stumbling step, then another. The arena, which had been full of noise, went completely silent. Hundreds of beings watched in stunned disbelief. This was not possible. A human had just struck a Vorgan warrior. Not just struck him, but hurt him. Krath tried to stay upright. His warrior pride demanded it. His culture demanded it. But his body would not obey. The strike had disrupted his nervous system, sent a shock wave through his brain. His balance was gone. His motor control was compromised. He dropped to one knee, catching himself with one hand on the arena floor. Jake had already reset his stance. He was ready to follow up if necessary, ready to defend if Krath somehow recovered and counterattacked. But part of him knew it was over. He had felt the connection. He knew what the strike had done. Krath tried to stand. He pushed himself up with his arms, but his legs shook. He made it halfway to standing, then fell forward again. This time he caught himself on both hands. His breathing was heavy and labored. His head hung low. The referees moved in quickly. Commander Vex and two others approached Krath, checking his condition. They asked him questions that Jake could not hear. Krath responded, but his words were slurred. He was conscious, but clearly not capable of continuing. Commander Vex's voice echoed through the arena. Cadet Krath is unable to continue. The winner is Cadet Jake Morrison. The arena erupted, not in cheers exactly, but in noise, shock, disbelief, argument. The Vorgan section sat in stunned silence. Some cadets were on their feet shouting. Others sat frozen, unable to process what they had just witnessed. Jake stood in the center of the arena, his hand throbbing from the impact. He looked at Krath, who was still on his hands and knees being helped by the medical staff. There was no joy in Jake's expression, no triumph. He had done what he needed to do. That was all. Drex rushed onto the arena floor along with Ven and several other cadets who had become Jake's friends. They surrounded him, talking excitedly. Jake heard their voices but did not really process the words. He was still in the zone, his mind clear and focused. Lieutenant Cora approached from the other side. She looked at Jake and nodded once. No words were needed. She had taught him what to do, and he had done it perfectly. The medical staff helped Krath to his feet and escorted him out of the arena. He was walking, but he needed support. His balance was still compromised. As he passed Jake, their eyes met for a brief moment. Krath's expression was complicated. Shame, confusion, and something else. Respect, perhaps. Or the beginning of it. Commander Vex dismissed the crowd and cadets began filing out of the arena. But they kept looking back at Jake. The way they looked at him had changed. He was not the weak human anymore. He was the cadet who had defeated a Vorgan warrior in single combat. As Jake left the arena with his friends, he heard cadets talking. Did you see that punch? One strike. Just one. How did the human know where to hit? That was incredible. We need to learn how humans fight. Jake's hand was swelling. The medical staff checked him over and confirmed he had no serious injuries. Just bruising on his knuckles from the impact. They wrapped his hand and told him to rest. Back in his quarters, Jake finally allowed himself to feel what had happened. His hands shook slightly, not from fear but from the adrenaline leaving his system. He sat on his bed and closed his eyes. He had done it. Against all odds, against everyone's expectations, he had won. Drex sat across from him, shaking his large head slowly. That was the most amazing thing I have ever seen. You should not have won, but you did. Jake opened his eyes and looked at his roommate. I won because I fought smart, not strong. That is what humans do. The day after the fight, Jake woke to find his life had changed completely. As he walked through the corridors to morning training, other cadets stopped and stared. Some nodded respectfully. Others moved aside to let him pass. The whispers followed him everywhere. That is the human. He defeated Krath with one strike. One punch. In the training hall, instructors who had barely noticed Jake before now watched him carefully. They asked him to demonstrate the strike he had used. Jake showed them, moving slowly so they could see the technique. The movement of his feet, the rotation of his hips, the extension of his arm, the precise target. Instructors from different species studied the technique with fascination. It was so different from their own combat styles, where most species relied on natural weapons or overwhelming strength. This was pure technique, precision over power, a knowledge over force. Commander Vex called Jake to his office later that morning. The insectoid commander sat behind his desk, his multiple eyes studying Jake carefully. You have created quite a stir, Cadet Morrison. The fight has been watched by thousands already. The recording is spreading through the coalition networks. Jake stood at attention. I only did what I needed to do, sir. Yes, and in doing so, you taught this academy an important lesson. Commander Vex leaned forward. Every species believes their way of fighting is superior. The Vorgans trust their strength. The Centauri trust their multiple limbs. The Thaldrine trust their armor. But you showed them something different. You showed them that intelligence and precision can defeat raw power. The commander stood and walked to the window overlooking the training facilities. When humanity first joined the coalition, many species dismissed you. They saw your physical limitations and assumed you were weak. You have proven otherwise, not just for yourself but for your entire species. Jake did not know what to say to that. He had just been trying to survive, trying to prove he belonged. He had not thought about representing all of humanity. Return to training, Cadet, Commander Vex said, and be prepared. Many will want to learn from you now. The commander was right. Over the next few days, dozens of cadets approached Jake asking to train with him. They wanted to learn human combat techniques. They wanted to understand how such precision strikes worked. Jake found himself teaching others, showing them footwork and angles and timing. Ven was one of his most eager students. The four-armed Centauri practiced the movements repeatedly, trying to adapt them to his own physiology. It is so different from what we are taught, Ven said. We use our arms to overwhelm opponents with multiple attacks, but your way is about economy. One perfect strike instead of many good ones. 3 days after the fight, Jake was in the training hall when Krath entered. The Vorgan had recovered physically, though there was still a slight stiffness in his movement. The room went quiet. Everyone stopped training to watch what would happen. Krath walked directly to Jake and stood before him. For a long moment, neither spoke. Jake kept his expression neutral, ready for anything. Krath could be here for revenge. Vorgan culture valued strength, and Krath had been defeated publicly. Then Krath did something unexpected. He raised his right fist and placed it over his heart. It was a Vorgan gesture of respect, given only to worthy opponents. I underestimated you, Krath said. His voice was steady but lacked the arrogance it had carried before. I saw only your size and assumed you were weak. I was wrong. Jake relaxed slightly. You are a powerful fighter. In a different situation, the fight could have ended differently. Krath shook his head. No, you won because you were smarter. You studied me. You found my weakness and exploited it. That is what a warrior does. He paused as if the next words were difficult. Would you teach me? I want to learn how humans fight. Jake was surprised. He had expected many things from Krath, but not this. Yet looking at the Vorgan's expression, he saw genuine respect there. Yes, I will teach you. Over the following weeks, an unusual friendship developed. Krath trained with Jake regularly, learning human combat techniques. In exchange, he taught Jake about Vorgan strength training methods. The two could often be seen in the training halls, the massive Vorgan and the relatively small human working together. Other cadets followed their example. The academy became a place of sharing and learning in a way it had not been before. Species that had kept to themselves began training together. Techniques were exchanged and adapted. The walls between different species began to break down. Jake continued his regular training, but now with new confidence. He understood his place here. He was not trying to be as strong as a Thaldreen or as fast as a Voxen. He was learning to be the best human warrior he could be, and that was enough. Lieutenant Cora pulled him aside one evening. You have changed this place. Do you realize that? Before you humans were seen as weak. Now we are seen as intelligent, adaptive, dangerous in our own way. You open doors for every human who will come after you. Jake had not thought about it that way. He had just been trying to survive, to prove himself. But Cora was right. The way other species looked at humans had changed. There was respect now. Caution, recognition that humans could be dangerous despite their lack of natural weapons. Months passed. Jake continued to excel in training, particularly in combat scenarios that required strategy and adaptation. He was not the strongest cadet or the fastest, but he was consistently in the top rankings. His ability to analyze opponents and find weaknesses became legendary. Near the end of the training cycle, Jake found himself standing in the observation deck, looking out at the stars. The same place he had stood on his first day, feeling small and uncertain. But now he felt different. He belonged here. He had earned his place. Drex joined him at the window. The Corvin had become a true friend over the months. Do you remember your first day? How lost you looked. Jake smiled. I remember thinking I had made a terrible mistake. That humans did not belong here. And now? Drex asked. Now I know different. Humans belong wherever they choose to be. We just have to be smart about it. Krath approached from behind, his footsteps heavy on the deck. The Vorgan had changed too over the months. He was less arrogant, more thoughtful. The defeat had taught him humility, something rare in Vorgan culture. Jake, I wanted to tell you something. I spoke with my father recently. I told him about our fight. Jake turned to face him. What did he say? He was disappointed at first, that I had lost to a human. But when I explained how you won, how you studied and planned and executed perfectly, he understood. He said you fought like a true warrior. He wants to meet you someday. That meant more than Jake could express. Acceptance from a Vorgan general, one of the most respected warriors in the galaxy. It showed how far things had come. News arrived that a new class of human cadets would be arriving next month. 10 more humans accepted into the academy based on Earth's successful integration. Jake would help train them, show them what he had learned. Commander Vex made an announcement to the entire academy. Cadet Jake Morrison had been selected for advanced leadership training. He would graduate with honors and be given a position as a junior instructor while continuing his own education. It was a rare honor, typically reserved for the top cadets from established warrior species. The night before the new cadets arrived, Jake stood in the same spot in the observation deck. He thought about his journey, about arriving scared and uncertain, about facing Krath in the arena, about one perfect strike that changed everything. He touched his right hand, the one that had thrown that strike. The knuckles had healed, though there was still a small scar. A reminder of the day a human proved that strength came in many forms. Behind him, the doors opened and a group of cadets entered. Different species, different backgrounds, but all wearing the academy uniform. They saw Jake and approached. Among them were several he had helped train. They asked his advice on an upcoming exercise. As Jake discussed tactics with them, he realized something. He was not just representing humanity anymore. He was part of something larger. A community of warriors from across the galaxy, all learning from each other, all becoming stronger together. The first of Earth's new cadets would arrive tomorrow. They would walk through the same corridors he had walked. They would face the same challenges, but they would not face the same doubt and dismissal that Jake had encountered. Because he had changed things. He had shown the galaxy what humans could do. The story that began with one scared cadet trying to prove he belonged had become something larger. It had become proof that humans had earned their place among the stars, not through brute strength or natural weapons, but through intelligence, determination, and the uniquely human ability to adapt and overcome. Jake looked out at the stars one more time. Somewhere out there was Earth, his home. He had left it as Jake Morrison, just a regular person. But he had become something more. He had become a warrior, a teacher, a bridge between humanity and the galaxy, and it had all started with one strike. One perfect moment when a seemingly fragile human cadet faced an alien warrior and refused to back down. In that moment, Jake had not just fought for himself. He had fought for every human who would come after him. And he had won. The galaxy had learned an important lesson. Never underestimate a human. They might look fragile. They might seem weak. But they